and welcome to UK Live with me, Helen Olsen-Bedford. Back in the summer, we explored how the public sector could take back control of outsourced contracts and bring its technology back in from the cold. The programme generated a lot of questions and a lot of interest, in fact so much so that we thought we'd dig a little deeper. So thanks to some research support from Rackspace and a number of interviews across the public sector, our report's almost ready for publication. But before we publish, we thought we would bring back some of the top-level findings to our expert panel here on UK Live. So joining me today to explore what's best for the public sector, insourcing, outsourcing, smartsourcing, are Tony Summers, who's the Chief Executive of Socitm Advisory, Amit Patel, who is the Director of Technology Design and Engineering at the British Heart Foundation, and Rhys Sharp, Solution Director at Rackspace. Thank you for joining me. So let's just kind of recap first to kind of outsourcing. You know, why were people doing it, and what was the problem? Why do we not carry on with it? Amit.
I don't think it was a problem. I think it was a phase. A lot of people thought it was the right thing to do. You know, if they've got problem areas in their department, using technology, give it to someone else. You know, there was always that mitigate the risk, pass it on, and I think that was what was happening a few years ago.
So they were outsourcing the problem, not fixing a problem, maybe.
Possibly, yeah, possibly.
Tony, would you have said you've seen that?
Whether that was the driver or not, I think we've certainly seen some evidence of that happening, and I think that maybe is a sign of some of the lack of maturity that was around at the time when outsourcing first kicked off. So I think we see quite a lot of legacy contracts where there was an expectation of investment and problem fixing, which maybe wasn't underpinned by the contract.
Bruce?
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I think the maturity in terms of the understanding of what they were actually outsourcing, and even from the supply side, you know, what they were actually walking into was less understood as well. So I think there was a bit of immaturity on both sides.
Yeah. And you know, there's obviously, you know, with a contract like that, you've said supply side and public sector side. There are obviously two sides to any part of contract. You're saying that there was kind of perhaps immaturity on both sides on that equation.
Yeah, I'd echo what Rhys has said. Actually, I think we'd observed that now, where contracts are causing frustration on both sides. Actually, and both recognise that the contract that was actually put in place at the outset maybe doesn't do either of them any favours, both public sector and provider.
Yeah.
And of course, having these long-term contracts in a world of fast-moving technology can be a bit of a problem, I think.
Yeah, it can do. I think it goes back to when the contract's first drawn up, and if everything isn't highlighted, the numbers look great, and sometimes it isn't just the numbers that we need to look at. It is actually what's going on at the front line, really. So it's understanding that, and it's fair to say it could be an immaturity thing, but it could be just not knowing all the facts.
Mm. Do you think there's a conflict perhaps as well? I mean, obviously they want to sell something, you need to buy something, and we've all got different objectives. I mean, in the public sector you want to make efficiency savings, reduce costs, and of course the private sector wants to sell you more. Do you think that's is that part of the immaturity, that perhaps we didn't get that balance or didn't understand that suppliers need to make money as well to make the contracts work?
I think there's another element as well. I think understanding the service and the impact to the user, and maybe not seeing sight of that, because a lot of these the challenges that people face are around actually the delivery of service is not fully understood from end to end, and so you can never deliver what the user really wants, and ultimately that reflects back into the procurement and the contract, and it reflects back in terms of how the supplier is actually delivering service, because they're delivering against, maybe it's a number, or it's something that somebody who's detached from the front end has actually described, and so everybody's on a hiding to nothing, really.
Yeah, and I think people change over the length of a contract. I think you've made the point, Helen, that some of these contracts are very long in duration, so 10 or 15 years, and the people who are managing the contract on both sides at the end of that are often very different to the ones who put the contract in place in the first place. So again, expectations, actually understanding what the basis of the contract was when it was let is fairly fundamental to that, I think. But again, in our observation, causes a lot of frustration, I think, where people don't understand that.
I'm just going to come back to the maturity of both sides on that equation as well in a minute. But don't forget, if you want to put some questions in, there's instructions on the side of your screen, so do drop them in and they will come up to me here. So any questions for the panel, do join in, please. But going back to the maturity, it's like it was very clear from our research, from talking to people, that not everyone's starting from the same place, whether they're in a contract, whether they're out of contracts, whether they're looking for contracts, and even the scale. I mean, we spoke to some district authorities with IT department of 10, and county councils and big organisations with an IT department of 100, central government departments with thousands. We're not all starting from the same place, but technology has been around. Didn't we all start with eGov programme funding? Tony?
Yes, in theory, but I
we
guess,
did have a similar starting point.
Well, in terms of funding, but I guess eGov only provided part of the funding for an IT service within a particularly large local authority. And I guess IT services, as we observe, are subject to all services. They're rationing decisions and prioritisation decisions within an organisation mean that they didn't always start at the same point.
I mean, is that particular to the public sector, or did you think that's in any sector? I mean, you've worked as well in the charity sector, but before that you've been in the private sector.
Yeah, so I've been across all three, and I think it's the same across the field. So investment in technology can differ between different companies. Sometimes it's regarded as a cost centre, and if you work in IT, you always hate the term being branded as a cost centre, but a lot of the time that's how a business will look at it, especially in the private sector. If you're spending money but you can't see the return on investment straight away, you are going to look for other avenues of saving money. And if someone comes to you with a proposal to say you'll double the amount of staff in IT but you'll half the cost, suddenly people are going to say yes, without really looking at the true delivery model or anything like that. And it can work, and it has worked for some companies. But we do see a lot of the cycle of coming back, insourcing, and then understanding what the needs are really. But if you're trying to please a board and you're sitting in any position of authority and you've got to make a decision, but one's being sort of, you've got a solution options paper, and the one which is green is the one which to outsource. You're going to go with that because obviously sometimes maybe not immature, but sometimes it looks like the best thing on paper.
And interesting, you said a cost centre. Do you think in the public sector, is IT, in local government, Tony, is IT still seen as a cost centre, bearing in mind that actually no council or public authority could operate without technology? Isn't it pretty strategically core?
I think I guess I'd make the link back to the conversation we've just had around the timing and the maturity, that certainly historically, as Amit has said, really, that IT was seen as a cost. It was the boxes and wires in the background that people didn't really need to know about. Increasingly, though, it's the enabler for change and transformation. So, and hence, I think where a lot of the frustration comes in that we see more recently, that the contracts were let very much based on a cost reduction exercise around managing infrastructure and tech. But the expectations now around a service that enables organisations to transform.
Reece?
Yeah, I think I've observed that what we're seeing now is a focus on the service delivery, and it's a focus on that endpoint service, and there's a much better understanding of how technology enables that and fits in with it, and I see it starting to transform in terms of the thinking within the authorities, how they join those things together, how the tech plays a role in the service endpoint, as it were. So I think it's changing, but it goes back to the fact that these contracts were let on almost on a cost technology basis.
So the world's shifted slightly. So actually now technology is key to the future, whereas in the past it might have been a cost centre. So there may be a complete disconnect there as well. But how do you change if you're in a contract? How do you have those relationships with suppliers? I mean, I must say that any press release on any contract win that comes into our editorial office is a partnership. It's always a partnership, and I wonder quite how many of those really are actual partnerships, Tony.
Yeah, it's a much used word, and again, I think historically it's difficult to look at a lot of the contracts that are now coming to an end, and certainly we get involved in advising around and seeing where the partnership element is. The maturity word, I think, comes up again, that maybe at a point of time the word partnership was used without really understanding what it meant. I think you made the point, Helen, that it takes two parties to make a partnership, and it's not evident really how that was encapsulated in the contracts that people end up managing. And So.
Yeah, I think partnerships are key at the moment. It is a little bit of a buzzword, but not every contract is a partnership. Like you said, some private companies just want to sell you something and you need to consume that. That's fine, but a partnership should be give and take. So. You know, we've started partnering with some big blue chip companies, and there is, you know, with the fact that we're British Heart Foundation, people do want to partner with us, and they do want to have us at their events and actually spread our good mission. But a partnership needs to work both ways, and that's basically it. It's not just what they're selling you. If you're just consuming what they're selling you, then you're just a customer. But a partnership, you know, you need to be able to give something back to your supplier, and the supplier needs to give you what you need as well.
That's an interesting point, though. I hadn't thought of that, because absolutely, yes, everyone must love having British Heart Foundation on there. Oh, that makes everybody feel good because everybody can identify with it. And does that help in forging those partnerships?
I think it does, yeah. So I've not been there too long, just under 2 years, and absolutely when we're you know, doing any commercial activity, any procurement, our brand is definitely something that we take with us into that room. But there's also the mission. So, you know, the well-being at work is a big thing that's very important at the moment, and we can help with that. So it absolutely is a partnership. So, you know, we may not charge for that, and they may be charging for a service, but having well-being at work is really important. So we kind of bring that to the table, you know.
Do you think, say, local government has the same advantage?
I think certain local authorities do, because of scale or, dare I say, brand in a local government context. There are certain local authorities, I guess, that suppliers would look to partner with because it gives them some kudos or leverage in the market. I certainly think that is the case. But again, I go back to the point that, and I think Amit just articulated it, that, you know, both partners need to know what the other needs out of the relationship, and I think again that's not often well understood. So, you know, the fact that private sector suppliers need to make a profit at the end of the day and need to be healthy is quite key to the relationship, and that's not always been understood. I would suggest.
I think sustainability,
yeah, indeed.
In fact, Reece, what are your thoughts on that?
I think as well it comes down to the vision for the partnership. So from a supply side, is this I'm just trying to sell something at this point in time, or am I looking for a long-term relationship? And it's those long-term relationships that foster the partnership piece, because you know, as everybody said, there's got to be something in it for both parties, and so contributing in a positive way to how a local authority is developing its staff is quite often key. At the same time, that it's a commercial organisation and they have to make a profit. If they don't make a profit, they disappear, and then actually it's worse for everybody. So there is that balance, but also it's about a long-term partnership, but not too long-term.
That's always the thing, isn't it? So, yes, it's always quite a tricky one. And in fact, so for those, because we came across a number of people in our, you know, a number of organisations in our research where they're in a contract and, you know, it may not be working for them. They may want to be looking to get out. It's always quite tricky. So, you know, how do you move out of a long-term contract? You might want to continue bits or parts. How do you do that?
Well, I think the first thing is start thinking about it early. I mean, it's surprising, really, and again, maybe a sign of the lack of maturity again at the outset of these contracts, that the exit arrangements are not well articulated.
We didn't come across many prenups.
No. So obviously, prenups, living wills is another new one. I think, there wasn't much thought, I'd suggest, in some of the contracts that we see around the end of the contract and how you transition out of it and what the sensible arrangements around that are for both parties.
Because you see a lot of, you go into a lot of councils as Socitm Advisory, and so is this something you do see quite a lot? Yeah,
absolutely, and a couple of live cases and some fairly recent ones, you know, and again, it hasn't served either party well, really, that those exit arrangements are not well articulated. So starting early in that process, and again, we see you know, a number of instances where people have left it too late and actually underestimating the amount of time that it takes to transition out of a big outsourced contract is something we see quite a lot. So people run out of time and have to extend by default. and then surprise, surprise, they get to the end of the extension and
they still have to
run
extend.
out of time again.
Gosh, that sounds like Brexit.
Well, yeah, there's some startling similarities there. But so those, I guess, have done it well, have taken the time to think about it early and actually start the conversation with the supplier early, actually.
Because you've done this, haven't you, Amit?
Yeah, I've been there almost a couple of times.
You're a repeat offender on that one. Then.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, and Tony, you hit the nail on the head there. People underestimate how easy it is to insource again. So recruitment takes time, it takes energy, it takes, literally you have to live it for as long as it takes. And attracting the right talent isn't easy. It definitely isn't, especially when your technology either has or hasn't moved on. So depending upon how your arrangement was with the outsourcer, you may have just kept the lights on. And to attract people to work on technology like that, it's difficult. It's difficult as well, where private companies are paying, right up there, and we've got to be realistic. Governments and local authorities and charity sector, we don't pay as much as others. So getting the right talent, you've got to attract that talent, and there's a reason why they might want to work for the local government or the charity and that. But you've got to tap into those resources, and it takes a long time. So if you're going to do it, you have to be thinking early. You're absolutely right.
I mean, one of the lovely quotes from was that you'll be over a barrel if you want to end the contract but have no internal team, which I think sort of sums it up. I mean, do you come across that?
Yeah, we've seen that. And again, back to the talent point is. Getting that talent to fill that gap is really, really difficult. And the worst thing could be is that actually you end up in another similar position because you don't have the talent to do that. We've certainly worked with a couple of organisations now, and we've been very conscious of that fact of there's a transitional period, and it actually adds risk to, as a supplier, if you're helping somebody come out of something like that, it actually adds risk to that process because the people are not there to catch it. So we almost have to take on that role. So it's quite difficult, and you've got to have a really good relationship between. It's got to be a partnership to actually be able to transition through something along those lines.
Because, I mean, that's kind of what you do, isn't it, Tony? I mean, you go in there because the skills, they don't have that skill set, and you are extra support to help them with that. I mean, how do you, talk me through about how do you build back a team? I mean, as Amit's just said, you've got all sorts of problems there in retaining a talent, recruiting a talent. Tony first, then Amit.
Well, again, as I think we both said, it takes time. So it's not something you can do overnight. You often, of course, more often than not, have the slightly tricky issue of TUPE to deal with anyway. So you're going to get probably a lot of staff back from the supplier at the end of the contract. And really it is about planning, designing the function the service that you need going forward, and identifying where those gaps are and starting those conversations with your supplier early, so which staff you're going to get back from the supplier and where you've got gaps and how you fill those. But it's a long process.
I would as well. I would say it's been even more complicated as well, because during that period the technology has changed. So the roles that are coming out and the roles that you actually need are different. They're slightly different. So we've worked alongside Socitm in certain places where there's actually been a reshaping of the technology team to fulfil different roles that are actually more aligned to that service delivery function. So it's maybe less about the technology sometimes and more about how you're fulfilling against the business, and that's a change as well. So it compounds the problem.
So, Amit, you've done this. Did you do this at British Heart Foundation and at your previous, I believe?
So we've not done it at British Heart Foundation. In fact, as an organisation, we've never outsourced. So it's quite refreshing to actually be told that. But I have done it previously, and what I did see was middle management were retained when we outsourced, which was great. But as the contract went on and we saw that it wasn't working, the middle management almost came down to the level of actually doers. so they were doing. So when insourcing came back around, they had to step back up, and it was actually quite hard because once you've gone back to doing engineering roles, to go back to management takes time, right? But then, you know, the emphasis was put on them to reshape it, you know, tell the rest what the structure needs to look like, and that's difficult, and it didn't work. So what then did have to happen was, you know, we got consultants in to help with the reshaping of the department, and exactly like Rhys said, things had changed, the technology had changed, so it wasn't the same roles that we were sort of looking for, and that's a real challenge.
And how do you? Obviously, they can't always be bringing people in, and they can't always find the right talent. But how do you help with, say, knowledge transfer? Do you make, you know, bringing the skills? So, say you bring specialist skills on X part of moving out of a contract. Do you then walk away and they have to then come back and get them, or do you help them learn and build up that skill set internally?
No, so we're about helping them learn and build up that skill set. So we restructured even our own service delivery to it's almost accommodating different stages of maturity from an organisational perspective or technology delivery perspective. So where there are lower levels of capability, we can bolster those, but we're quite happy to let them roll down and do the knowledge transfer and then transition them back to the organisation. So we recognise that, and especially, to be honest with you, especially in public sector, and it's almost helping through the reshaping of the roles as well. So you know, we're very clear about what we do, and where we can play, and we're quite flexible in terms of how we'll work against that. And I think it's been really important in the journey we've had in terms of dealing with public sector.
Tony, is that the approach, do you think? To
Yeah,
bring
no, absolutely.
in, pick what you need, cherry pick?
I wouldn't have said cherry picking, but in terms of helping the transition and knowledge transfer and building that capability within the authority to manage the new service going forward, I think is fundamental. Otherwise, effectively, you become part of the problem that you're trying to solve.
You become the next outsource.
Well, yeah,
the
indeed.
next long-term contract.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like Rhys and Rackspace, then we get involved in that, filling the gaps, I guess, managing the transition, and then supporting the building of the capability within the organisation going forward.
I just want to switch back to looking at the retaining, you know, recruiting and retaining staff, because you made a really good point there, and it's one that cropped up a lot in our conversations in the research, that actually you can't pay the same as the private sector, certainly not, say, banking, finance. It's just, you know, it's just not the same. And certainly for authorities that are, say, in London, they're competing quite heavily for staff. But there are lots of benefits to working in the public sector, aren't there? I mean, obviously, you know, everyone must feel proud to work for the British Heart Foundation, and I think that public service does extend to all of the public sector. Yeah.
So when I was working for central government, I think I spoke to you before about it, Helen. I worked with a guy that you know, became a civil servant while I was there, and he was so proud. He was actually proud. That was his journey. That was what he wanted to do, and it was an achievement. You know, he was so proud to go home and tell his family and extended family. But there is absolutely big benefits for working for central and local government, and like I said before, if you can find those people, they're the right people to be working there, and they're no less talented to the ones that are working in fintech or whatever, but they want to work for a certain type of organisation and achieve something.
Which is always nice. It kind of makes you feel proud. We're talking about the public sector and not some other sector. But you know, but there's other benefits too, aren't there? I mean, we had things like you know, flexible working, work-life balance, all sorts of other benefits that maybe you don't get in other more stressed. Well, I don't know, the public sector's pretty stressed as well in austerity.
I think quite often it's also about location. So you'll get quite a few people that have often worked in London or worked in the city, but actually their hometown is really out in the country, and they will look for those roles sometimes to go. Effectively, it's closer to home. It could be a different work-life balance they're looking for. Absolutely, we see. Well, I've seen that happen quite a few times now.
There was another comment there around recruitment, which was succession planning. Somebody said, "Well, actually, some of us, we've got people that have been there too long." Another one was, "We need to bring through new skills, but this in a highly unionised sector, it's not always easy." Is that... Who would like to answer? Tony.
Yeah, no, true. I mean, to be honest, I don't see the overly unionised bit too often, but I think it is more a challenge of, an evolving workforce and evolving skills required, and how you train and develop your workforce to be able to fulfil those. Really, I don't necessarily see the resistance from the staff side in doing that. It's what you put in place to enable it, and sometimes there's a lag in doing that.
Yeah, I'm a true believer in investing in our people, but I don't own their careers; they own them. So for me, it's very much sitting down with any of my direct reports and actually mapping out what their career looks like, and it's amazing how much that really does make a difference. If someone knows, actually, I can achieve what I want to, and put this in front of my manager, that's great. But it has to cascade all the way down. So even those people that are just on the, we say they're the front line and they're taking the service desk calls. But if they know what their career plan looks like, that's amazing. And you will retain them. They'll stay because they know that actually I'll be able to get somewhere. I've got a journey. So
another sort of pattern of comments that came around at this point in the conversation with people was along the lines of, how do you retain talent was, well, we try to prioritise the work so that in-house get the good stuff and we put the mundane, dull stuff out. We put people on the fun, new stuff. We embrace cloud and new technologies, cognitive services, etc. That attracts them. So is there some truth in that, do you think, from your experience?
I've got a great example. Sorry, Reece.
We all like to play with new toys.
Azure was a big thing for us. So moving our website out, and we partnered with Rackspace to do this. And there was a lot of, we want to do it. Why don't we do it internally? We can. And actually now we've given the mundane Azure stuff to Rackspace, but it's a partnership. So they've trained our staff, so we know how to do it. If we want to take it back, we can. Insource, but yeah, that is actually the mundane stuff. So where Azure was great, but there's fun stuff in Azure, and then there's just the infrastructure, which actually it's just another data center. Yeah. So that is a partnership because they've said we'll take the boring stuff, that's fine, but to get people internally to realise that actually the new stuff isn't always the fun stuff, takes a little bit of coaching.
So immediately everyone thought, we're going to go Azure, we want to learn all of that, and then. Yeah. Actually, the reality is quite dull and admin heavy and not terribly exciting.
Yeah, there's a load of stuff in the background that just needs to operate and work and be monitored and looked after, and that's what we do. And part of it as well is giving organisations the headspace to be able to do that, because at the end of the day, we don't know how an organisation operates. We don't know the processes of actually how they deliver to their customers. So if we can take the mundane stuff away, that we'll quite happily do that. If it enables them to actually understand how technology impacts their service, brilliant. We're all winners at that point.
Tony?
I think I can only echo what Reece and Amit have said, but I guess someone has to do the boring stuff somewhere, and it's all the good, if we can keep it, within if we can use it to incentivise people who are going through change in public sector, that's fine. But
because there's some quite sort of exciting technologies coming down the road, aren't there, with the cognitive services and robotic process automation and stuff. That must be quite a few people keen to do that, but patching the infrastructure may not be the most exciting task.
No, and again, in theory, that new technology replaces some of the boring transactional stuff, I guess, that people have been doing up till now, and hopefully frees up time to do some of the more interesting and exciting stuff.
I just had a question come through. Actually, I'm just gonna pop back to talking about suppliers and partnerships, because it's an interesting question. I don't really like to go back in a conversation, but what exactly can a supplier learn from a partnership? What type of learnings can it glean from government partners?
Oh.
Wow, that's an interesting turn it around.
It is, and so again, it's really interesting to work with organisations that are going through reorganising themselves. Some of the things that are going on, some of the ways of thinking, and understanding the focus that they have on their customer it plays back into how we work. It plays back into how we talk to other organisations. So, we've done quite a few bits of work with local authorities, and it always enhances the conversation that we have. So, we're learning from that side of it. Likewise, with in the charity sector, we have a big focus internally around how we have this thing called Rack Gives Back. And it's about how we engage with charities.
Rack gives back.
and so we do a lot of coding schools, so we take our skills and bring them into schools. But at the same time, we try and promote the charities that we work with within the organisation. So we take their message, bring it back in. We've got our well working, we've got what we do in terms of trying to help raise money in their mission. So, there's a lot that can be taken on. And I think as well, it plays into... I think the supplier has to have a culture that takes that as well. And so where the culture is about trying to do better and a strong core set of values in terms of how we empower people, how we act as humans, it is also important. And we can learn a lot from the organisations that we work with on how they're doing things, bring that back into our own organisation to deliver in a better way.
Have you seen that then from the other sides, from the suppliers? Do you think that there are suppliers like Rackspace that are doing this? Yes. That are taking on board the kind of the public value, the public service side almost?
So actually, yeah, I've seen it, especially at British Heart Foundation. It's interesting because I know we're talking about sourcing, but we've taken our procurement up a level. So we go directly to vendors now. The vendors might then say, they'll work with us and then say, these are our preferred partners, why don't you, procure through them. But once we've taken it up that notch, it almost is, they're very interested in our business. They're interested in what we do and how they can take knowledge from us to others in the same sector. And obviously people, other charities aren't going to come to us. They do, but not always. They'll go to their providers and suppliers. And I think that's where these partners can help. Because if they take away knowledge from us, and I don't mean intellectual property, I mean knowledge of how we work or how we've done something successfully, and take it to someone else, that's where success is driven. And I can see it within local authority. If they help someone in one area and they take the same sort of methodologies and show another area in the UK and it works, that's exactly what a supplier should be doing.
So they can help with spreading the knowledge and the skills. Yeah. I mean, that brings me on to skills. I mean, how do we keep skills up to date in such a fast-moving digital world? I mean, how do we keep people up to date?
It's a challenge. I don't think there's an easy answer to that, Helen, really. It is. So I guess the starting point is understanding that it is fast changing and that what the skills you might need now are very different to the ones you might need in 2 or 5 years' time, and embedding that within your organisation. So we see, again, it's a bit like IT as a cost centre. Historically, learning and development and training teams were seen as the first to go, maybe when money was tight. But building that organisational design, learning and development culture within your organisation, I think, is key to that.
Do you think we have enough of that in the public sector, about that culture of continuous development? I mean, you've mentioned professional development already, but is that common to all organisations? That it's got that change is the new normal.
It is, yeah, it is. I think that there is that in the public sector. I think more so it needs to be foresight. So if you're looking at your roadmap and there are new technologies that you will be looking to deliver or move to, you should be thinking about how training needs to be delivered to the people that are going to be looking after it or helping to implement it. So running courses prior to your projects is a good way to do it. And don't get me wrong, people may do the courses and get the certifications and leave, and that is a risk.
You've trained somebody else's.
But if you've got a shared vision with everyone in your team, and you're sharing the roadmap and you're sharing where you're trying to get to, and you're saying, actually, we need to train you up so that when we get to this, the fun stuff, you'll be involved. It hopefully will retain those staff and upskill them. It may not always work, but it, you know, and you've got to have training budgets, obviously. So that needs to be ticked off first, I guess.
Have you seen much of those? I mean, you know, in austerity, did a lot of those get cut?
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, as I say, I think training was generally the first thing to go in corporate budgets. But I think just to pick up Amit's point and develop it slightly further, I guess it's how we also, I guess, change the culture of organisations so that individuals see a responsibility on themselves to continue to learn and develop. So absolutely, you can run courses at the start of a project or a programme, but as we've said, change is the new normal. So how people then survive in that environment and how they take responsibility for their own development, I think is a bit of a cultural shift, which I've not seen a great deal of yet coming through. But,
I mean, one thing that we found quite a lot, which was something that I you know, that should not come out so strongly before in any of our research, is that, you know, change is the constant training, keeping skills up to date, but also the fact that, you know, cloud has got enormous benefits, but always on, evergreen, ever-changing, you know, comments along the lines of, you know, challenge to keep skills up to date and train end users. A user can find that something has been moved or changed, and that will throw their whole day upside down. You know, people are struggling to deal with new cloud services where users would turn up one morning, it's been updated, doesn't look the same. I mean, how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, it's actually a fascinating observational point, I guess, that so you're right, you know, cloud products tend to evolve far more rapidly than the traditional applications that people might have used. But if you then talk to users, I mean, you know, they're also users of Amazon or eBay or you know, you use Office 365 in their personal lives, but somehow when they come into the workplace, there's some dependency that someone else is going to train them to do that. And I don't think anyone probably had any training on Amazon, yet people manage to use it. So I think it's a cultural mindset shift, really, that you know, it seems to me we need to somehow get across. But
no, I'd agree completely. That the cultural shift in terms of, and it goes right from the end user all the way through to the tech department, the IT department at the back there. You're no longer stationary on everything. You are constantly changing and evolving. There's new capabilities coming along. There's also even just looking at things and optimizing cost is an activity that has to occur. And when you're making a change in your environment, actually there will, once you're with cloud, it won't be a case of, I could just squeeze this onto this particular server because I paid for that already. So now you're going to switch something on and there's going to be a cost associated with it immediately. And that's a real change in terms of how people need to look at the technology roadmap, what they're doing, how their services are delivered, etc. So yeah, big change.
That actually nicely, thank you very much, brings me on to the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is procurement. So, you know, how does the new world of the cloud environment, how does that change procurement? We're moving from kind of CapEx to OpEx, and as you say, it's not maximising resource, it's on-off.
Yeah.
I mean, how has that changed? Is traditional procurement able to deal with that? Amit, you're nodding there. You're nodding a lot there.
My answer's no. Yes. You're buying a service. We've had challenges recently with procurement internally because we buy assets for IT, similar to we buy assets for facilities. But trying to, you know, sort of get a procurement team's head around, we're not buying tables, we're not buying computers anymore, we're actually buying services. It does take, you know, it takes a little bit of effort. What we had more challenging was the financial model behind it. So, like you say, it's moving to an OpEx model. But very much in our eyes, we depreciate everything we have over, let's say, a 3-year cycle. We're taking out a service for 3 years, so we're not depreciating it, we're just paying for it over 3 years. And this came about quite a few years ago when I was in utilities. We started to look at a TOTEX model, and it was when we first went to TOTEX, total expenditure rather than CapEx or OpEx. It's a combined. And it was when we first went to email in the cloud, Microsoft Online at the time. It wasn't branded 365. But as soon as we started looking at a TOTEX model with finance and procurement, it was oh, this is easy. It's just the same. It doesn't really matter. But if you split it out, it's the, you know, we've been doing it like this for years. You know, exactly like the users. We've been coming in and the button's been there every day, but now it's moved to down there. It's just a different way of looking at it. So yeah, it's assets that is very difficult to get people's heads around. But it, yeah, I think it's ever changing. It's not just IT that's moving to subscription-based models. We're doing it with everything.
I mean, we do that in our private lives. But how easy is that to do in a local authority or public sector world when you've got very strict budget and reporting requirements?
The procurement side. So I guess what my observation would be that we still see lots of procurement people trying to put cloud contracts in place for 10 years or more.
Gosh.
Well, indeed, yeah. So there's a question there about, well, if the last one didn't work, if that 10-year outsourcing contract didn't work, why are you trying to replicate that sort of long-term relationship? Yeah. So I think there's still maybe a legacy understanding or expectation that longer-term contracts equals good price and good value, where I think the mindset again needs to shift in a cloud world. So that certainly is a dynamic that we see. I mean, on the funding side, again, I'd sort of echo what Amit has said, really, that it's often a lack of understanding around how actual capital funding gets funded, capital expenditure gets funded, and it's more of a budgetary issue than a funding issue. So we have lots of conversations around affordability. But it actually boils down to, you know, I had some money in a capital programme and I can't access that money to pay for my subscription costs. But actually, when you look at it in the round, it doesn't actually cost anymore. It just happens to sit in different budgets.
In a different budget. But I think your point, though, Rhys, about it, you know, you turn it on and it's always, you know, it's instant. It's not maximising something that's already there. I mean, that does echo a number of comments we had along the lines of, we need a specialist to understand not just the technology, but how licensing works, because it's completely changed. And another one was saying, you know, we need someone who, a new role of someone who just manages license, looks at licensing. It's
yes, I mean, it's a really interesting one. Ultimately, maybe it's brought that to the fore, but if you were following ITIL principles and things, you would have a licensing sort of function, software asset management.
But you might look
typically
at that, say, once a year or once every 6 months, whereas they're saying this is now daily, where, you know, it's changing on a daily basis.
It does indeed, and I think that there are elements to it. There are people that need to look at that from a daily perspective. What are we spending there? The people that are going to consume, maybe it's the customer, the tech people that are going to consume something, they have to understand switching it on. There's a cost to it, and it's immediate. It's not just I can buy a blanket set of licenses. So there's a whole different education to be had around, you know, how the subscription licensing will work, and what does that really mean to the organisation. So it's complex. There's no two ways about it. You know, we spend a lot of time in terms of helping people understand how to understand the costs of the cloud infrastructure and the cloud services that are being brought out, and there are tricks to doing that, which actually, if you don't know, you wouldn't understand. So we'll help people do that. So you can say, well, actually, we can see that this cost bucket of things here associates with a particular department. So actually, you can improve the ability of the call it the software asset manager or the licensing people to understand where those costs actually sit within the organisation. But you've got to just understand how to be able to switch those on and then report on them afterwards.
Do you think this is like a new role in sort of client side?
I don't think it's new, no. I think there should have always been someone looking after licences, whether they're perpetual or subscription based. But we are in a little bit of a limbo at the moment, because you've got all the new cloud services and you may have perpetual licences. So you can bring your own, or you can subscribe to licences through, you know, whatever cloud provider you're getting. We'll get over that hurdle in a few years, because people won't have perpetual licences that work on current software. But you're absolutely right, we can switch things off as well. So if you only need a license for 3 months, you only have a license for 3 months.
Yeah.
So we're not buying a perpetual license that lasts 3 years. In fact, there should be a cost saving there. And this is, again, it's an understanding thing. And it may not apply so much in the real world, but it does sometimes, because you can buy an Amazon Music subscription for a few months and cancel it when you want. Maybe not so much on a car lease, because a bit difficult to get out of one of those. But but if you start looking at that, then yes, it is an everyday job. But actually, it's going to save you money. So that role, if it is new for your organisation, can probably quite easily be funded by the savings that you make. But you probably need to put a business paper together and present that and see how that sort of goes. But yeah, it shouldn't be a new role.
I mean, how the way that cloud is changing the way that we operate and run the infrastructure, etc. I just want to throw in there, what are your thoughts on the cloud first in the kind of smart sourcing scenario, smart sourcing mix? Because, that was going to be reviewed back in May. That was GDS's policy from 2013. They were going to review it, and now they're saying they were going to stand by it. Where do you think that actually the reality of cloud first stands now?
I think as long as it's understood as cloud first as an option and a consideration, and not being forced to adopt where it's not appropriate, then I think it's absolutely a good model. Forces you to think about your new delivery models, and increasingly we see local authorities at least adopting that sort of cloud first where appropriate strategy, and I think it works well if you consider that it's not cloud only.
Yeah,
yeah. I think I would echo that. It's about finding the appropriate, and actually the point there is it makes organisations think about the systems and the software they're consuming, and again going back to the other point around the licensing, even a perpetual licensing model may not be the most appropriate to move to a cloud. And we see those types of activities going on as to how do you assess that, how do you understand, and I think it's really important that organisations do, and it will only lead to a better outcome in the end. Being able to switch something off when it's not being used, or after a period of time when that project's rolled down, it is a cost saving, and I think people don't often appreciate that. So appropriate use of cloud, absolutely the mantra.
So maybe it should have been cloud as appropriate, not cloud first.
Yeah. So that was
your comment in the research, wasn't it?
So when I arrived at British Art Foundation, I was heading up enterprise architecture, and I changed the principles. And the first one was cloud first, where appropriate. And this did get a lot of questions, and it needed to be explained. And actually, since then, we built out 2 data centres, so it wasn't appropriate for that. And we did that because our comms rooms were still in our office sites, and we needed tier 3. And the where appropriate, which fitted in there, was the cost implication of going all in with cloud wasn't right for us. It simply wasn't right. And we very much realised that there's a roadmap to this. We will move a lot of it to cloud, and it will be sort of line of business apps when we look at them. If there's a SaaS offering, if there's PaaS, if there's IaaS, and IaaS is actually the last on the list. So where we say cloud first, but IaaS is actually after data centre of our own. But you've got to understand your business as well, because there are smaller businesses where cloud first and try and put everything out there will be a huge cost saving. Unfortunately, we're not in that space. But some of the local authority might be. They might be able to say, what, we've got 30 servers. If we move them, we can actually function in it, and we can automate it so they power down at night and just do what we need them to do, and we're saving some money. And we don't own any assets. We're not,
Yeah, I mean, a common sort of a summing up of a common one was that cloud first is great if you've got a greenfield infrastructure. If you're a greenfield site, that's great. But when you're dealing with legacy, which most of the public sector is dealing with, it's not always as simple as it sounds.
Yeah.
No, so I guess in lots of those instances, they're a hybrid model, so it's how you transition to cloud over time. So rather than putting everything in the cloud, it's actually how you take the opportunity to take cloud products and create a hybrid model while the...
Which actually ties with the question that's just come in. We've
Okay.
only got 10 minutes left, by the way.
All
We're
right,
racing
okay.
through time. If you go for a hybrid model, how do you integrate the different elements? If you're outsourcing, smart sourcing to different elements to different suppliers, how do you, and keeping some of the functions in-house, how do you manage? Isn't this a really complex world to be inhabiting?
It is.
Yes.
It is. And I think, Rhys, you probably add to this, but there's data is key at the moment. You need to know where your data is and how you access it and which systems need to talk to others. And you can only do that if you've got your integration sorted out. So back a little bit to procurement, when you are sourcing new products, you need to be talking to your SaaS providers about how you integrate with your key systems. So, I mean, if you've got your finance system sitting in-house and you're going out for, I don't know, a vehicle tracking system, but they need to talk, you need to be looking at how those APIs are going to talk, or what it's going to affect on your integration layer. And this is definitely where your architects will come in, because they will make sure that they're designing with your partners or SaaS providers. But it's a real problem, it really is, because cloud first, where appropriate, you'll be picking different clouds and you'll be going multi-cloud, and you just need to know exactly where your data is moving across those. And it might be right to have express routes, direct connects, those sort of things, because you're actually consuming certain clouds more. But your integration is key, and that's what people need to start really thinking about before moving everything
How
out.
important is the information architecture, the infrastructure?
Hugely important, and especially if there's regulation that comes in or data sovereignty, those factors all play into that. If you're consuming a SaaS product from somewhere, where is that SaaS product actually held? Where is it storing its data, and what is the data that you're going to store? So it almost comes back to understanding more about what you have today. No longer is it a black box where you just chuck things in and they'll run. You've got to think about what's going in, where it's going to be stored, what the data is. It's really important. We also work with a lot of banks in this area. They have regulation per territory. So if you've got a large global bank, they're even more complicated. So incredibly important to understand your data and those integration points. And if those integration points don't exist, why? Ask your SaaS provider, why do you not provide me with an API or an open API that's free? It's another area that is often a challenge.
We can talk about APIs for hours. It's one of my favourite topics. I mean, do you come across this much? Certainly with a lot of the legacy suppliers sometimes on APIs?
Yeah, I wasn't particularly going to pick up the API question. I think it's probably a slightly different observation I'd make is the other challenge, I guess, is around that capability around supplier management. So I guess where we came into this conversation from the outset, so there's the technical integration bit, but actually if you've got a multi-supplier environment, having that capability to actually manage those multiple suppliers is again something you need to make sure that you focus on.
That's quite a new skill set then,
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Along with the changes in procurement. So there's quite a lot of new skills and the information architecture side that needs to be.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a good point. We went through a procurement through G-Cloud, and there was I remember we spent quite a lot of time with the procurement department because it was new to them. It was slightly new to us, but we had to sign up to an agreement to work with some of the other suppliers in their procurement framework. So we could it just guaranteed almost interoperability or the ability to have the conversation in the right framework in the right way. So it's something that procurement need to embrace and look after. From a supply perspective, it wasn't a problem.
But it could be for some suppliers.
It could be.
I mean, is that
Absolutely.
something that you would advise people to put into their contracts as they're looking? Is that a good thing to be saying? I need your APIs. I need your integration. Play nicely with my suppliers.
Yeah, certainly from the API and integration point of view, I think that's fairly common nowadays in new contracts. But the obligation, which I thought I heard Rhys say, to actually work with other suppliers is an interesting one that I don't think I've seen. So, but again, I guess that's going to be key in that multi-supplier environment. So.
Yeah, we've recently done it. Recently last year, where we've got a big retail estate. We've got our corporate, and it was networks. We partnered with an incumbent actually that was their area is retail, and our corporate was with a different supplier, and what they've done, you know, we've actually put it into the contract. You have to work on the designs together, and they've done workshops, and they're working on it together. But it is very difficult because you know, the project manager is almost a contracts manager, making sure that they're, you know, doing the bits that we've agreed to. But it has worked, and it's within everyone's best interest, because a supplier doesn't want to just dump you the products and go. They're not just reselling boxes, they're actually giving you a service, because they're going to have to support it, you know, at the other side. And it is something, I think it is key. We need to be putting those into the contracts and thinking about them up front. You will be working with our other suppliers, and this is how it needs to
we are down to almost the last 5 minutes, so we're really running out of time. So kind of what I wanted to ask you was kind of what's your thoughts on what's best for the public sector? Outsource, insource, Rackspace, task source, Smartsource, and what advice would you give for organisations looking to get smart with their sourcing? Tony?
So in terms of what's the right model, I don't think there is one right model. So we've talked, I guess, this morning about trends and, you know, maybe some of the things that didn't go quite so well in those contracts that are coming to an end, and maybe driving people down a different model route. But we work with authorities who are insourcing and those who are actually currently outsourcing. So I don't think there's a universal model out there that people are moving towards. I think we've just touched on some of the things you need to put in place if you're looking for a right sourcing or smart sourcing model, if you want to call it that, i.e. a multi-vendor, multi-technology model, which is around the architectural expertise and supply management, I would say, which again traditionally wouldn't necessarily have been a local government, public sector skill set.
I think Tony summed it up. I said, you know, I call it right sourcing, don't I? So our partnership with Rackspace, we haven't outsourced, we've just right sourced with the right partner, and I think that's
a whole change in kind of cultural and view on where the responsibilities are.
Absolutely, yeah, I think so. And you know, if you've got a managed service provider, they're not an outsourcer. You're not chucking everything over the fence, and that's, you know, it's very different. You're asking them to support you with services that maybe you wouldn't do in-house and you need to do yourself. It comes back to cloud. Maybe source with what is appropriate. So, you know, you have to work out exactly what your needs are and who can give that to you. So, you know, a lot of it you probably can do internally, but there's some areas that actually it's easier to give to someone else, because if we're going to insource or try and recruit for those individuals, you know, we'll be paying top end, and actually we can give it to a partner who've already got those top end guys and girls. So
I think call it smart sourcing. The task element's interesting in that I think there are tasks that you would send out to somebody else. Maybe it's the mundane tasks, as we came back to. But I think Tony was right. It's the model changes. The skills you need to manage that model are different. It's not just putting out the mess for less. It's actually about understanding the components. What's the objective you're trying to achieve, and then sourcing that to the right place. So based on the objective you've got to achieve, and how maybe the partner aligns with that objective.
Before we go on to final thoughts, there's just a couple of questions that come in along similar lines, boiled down. It's around licensing, around the conversation we had around licensing, saying that actually some licensing, Microsoft licensing, is not as easy to cut as you want because you can't switch it on and off as mentioned, or it's not very flexible for switching off to save money. Are they doing it wrong, or is there any way around that, Tony?
I think, funny enough, that was the point I was going to make at the time, that it sounds good in theory that, you know, with a cloud model you can switch it off and switch it on, but I'd suggest that the supplier licensing models still have a way to go to make that possible. So we still get into lots of conversations with suppliers where actually it's a 5-year deal. You think, well, it's a cloud license subscription model. How are we talking about a 5-year deal? But I think that's still the currency, and is probably some of that legacy of the old, you know, perpetual and support maintenance type contracts that people, I guess, have still got in their minds. But
yeah, I think there's a bit of a catch-up from the big vendors, actually. So if you are a small company and you're not able to get an enterprise license agreement, absolutely, you're not going to be able to switch off and switch on. with such agreements at the end of the year, they'll go, you said you were going to consume 500, you consumed less, and so actually you're paying a little bit less again, and that does happen. But if you're a smaller firm and you can only go out and get a certain amount, and that's below the threshold, you're not enterprise to them, and they need to be starting to look at that. And I think it might be a sector thing. They need to be looking at what sector it is and change the models. But if you're just doing one for all, it may not work.
So it's a rapidly evolving market on both sides, with new skills needed on both sides.
Yep, it is. Yeah, very much so.
Well, I'm afraid we are pretty much out of time. Thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully next steps for the public sector is to continue its journey to be an intelligent customer in terms of smart sourcing, outsourcing, insourcing. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you in the new year. Thank you.